I'm Elle Embers, and this is Cosmic Curiosities. Hey guys, welcome back to Cosmic Curiosities. On today's episode, I wanted to talk about astrology. Astrology is something that a lot of people are familiar with, but we can struggle to understand it. Whether you're a fiery Aries, a mysterious Scorpio, or perhaps you don't resonate with your sign at all, but chances are you still know what it is. But do we really know what it means? What can the sun, moon, and stars really tell us about the universe or about ourselves? I wanted to know more about why planets, other than our own, could have such influence over us. I mean, you mention something crazy happening, and people start asking, what planet went into retrograde? So, to find out, today, I'm joined by my good friend Kelsey. Kelsey is a Hellenistic astrologer based in the beautiful city of Los Angeles, which is kind of on brand when you think about it. I mean, the city of angels, astrology, the universe, it all kind of ties together, right? But while listening back to my chat with Kelsey, it really had me thinking about destiny versus fate. Because we touch on this in today's episode. And it's a question that still comes up for me. Is our fate written by the stars? Or can we create our own destiny? Well, I'll leave it up to you to decide. Hey Kelsey, thanks so much for being here. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Elle.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this chat with you. But before we dive too much into things, would you like to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what's your story? How did you find yourself in astrology?
So, hello, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm really stoked to be talking about astrology here. I'm an astrologer. I practice Hellenistic astrology, specifically. But I have a background studying different forms, which was a really important part of my journey. I also have a day job where I work in a psychiatric practice. I work with depression and anxiety patients and help them to kind of reframe their consciousness through a variety of things. We actually do microdosing of ketamine in the practice. So this is all supervised by a doctor. And then I guide them through an experience, whether it's Reiki, sound healing. Sometimes we get into astrology because my boss is super cool.
Super cool.
Yeah, and he's a Virgo rising, so total doctor energy, doctor vibes. But yeah, he has been really a great role model and specifically like a mentor in helping me along my spiritual journey, actually, because working in medical helped me to realize that healing is so much more than what Western medicine offers. And also just that part of me that's really plugged into my conscious experience and my philosophy of life as a ninth house Mars, and I'm ruled by Mars. I really needed to understand the bigger picture here, and I've studied lots of different modalities to get there. I went through trainings in Reiki and yoga. I thought I wanted to be a yoga teacher. I thought I wanted to be a therapist, studied psychology, but I decided to go more towards like bhakti yoga and Indian astrology. Then I kind of got a little overwhelmed. If anyone studied Indian astrology, Vedic astrology, it was a really important part of my journey, and I'm so glad that I spent that year studying it. But I decided to go to Hellenistic astrology because mainly there were a lot of philosophical and metaphysical concepts that just clicked with the history behind Hellenistic astrology and how it differed from modern astrologers' symbols and interpretations of planets in a birth chart. So yeah, that's where I am. I'm practicing my Hellenistic astrology readings over Zoom with clients, and that's been about 1.5 years now. Super exciting. I've always wanted to do this, and I think I kept that part of me really silent for a while because it's such a taboo thing, and I work in a medical office. But with the support of awesome coworkers and friends, my boyfriend, my family, I just felt really like I needed to embrace this part of myself and not worry about what the world thinks of me. Because there are some people that don't understand astrology. It's not that they don't believe in it, they don't understand it. And it's not easy to understand. So I don't blame them. And I'd be happy to explain it anytime anyone will ask you. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Kels. I completely get what you mean, though, because if you ever ask anyone what their star sign is, they can tell you their star sign, they know, and they'll tell you all the qualities that they have in common with that particular star sign. But if you ask them, what's your top 3? Do you know your sun, your moon, your rising? They kind of look at you like, wait, what? Things get a little bit more complicated from there, and it's a bit harder to understand.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's like such a key difference with the practice of more intricate historical traditional forms of astrology, like Vedic astrology and Hellenistic, is there's a lot of focus on the fact that you have actually every sign in your chart. We were joking about this earlier, that like people will say, oh, I'm a Capricorn, and I don't relate to it. So I like to say, well, yeah, I mean, you probably have other placements that are more prominent, or maybe your Capricorn sun, it has Saturn there, and maybe there's a big challenge in you embodying that energy of your sun, which is emblematic of your plot line or the ideal image. So I think astrology is just not well understood in terms of what it's actually communicating in the modern system.
Yeah.
Because we just look at the placements and we kind of like, we make them characteristics of ourselves, like, oh, like I'm super flirty because I have my Venus in Libra, or oh, I'm, unattainable because my Venus is in Sagittarius. But no, what does Venus rule in your chart? And that goes into the houses, and we can get into that if you'd like as well. But basically, planets, they can mean a variety of things, and that's why astrology is so difficult to grasp and understand.
Yeah. What would you say are the main differences between Hellenistic astrology and ancient astrology compared to, I guess we'd call it modern astrology or Western astrology? What are the main differences between the two?
Sure. So I would say the key differences between the two are really in the metaphysical and philosophical concepts behind all the meanings. And we'll start with just the house system, because that's the key difference you'll notice. Like if you have a CoStar app or something like that, you might see your chart in Placidus house division system. That's going to divide. This is Western astrology we're talking about, modern astrology. So that's going to divide your chart and the houses based on the degree of your rising sign, which makes a lot of sense if we could really see to that exact precision in ancient Greece, which we could not. So for me, it made more sense just learning about the metaphysical background and conceptual understanding of what the planets and their movements mean, it made more sense to divide the houses equally, having known that ancient astrologers used signs as the houses. Whichever sign that you have on the eastern horizon at the moment you were born is your rising sign. And it marks the characteristics or the flavor of that first house, which is all about you, your psyche, your appearance. Sometimes you and I, we have an intensity. We're Scorpios. Usually the eyes pop out. There's glasses or eyebrows. You and I have, brows on fleek always, I'm sure.
Thank you.
So with this first house, we can tell so much about ourselves. And I like to understand it as, no matter where the degree falls, it's just kind of like a tarot reading. If you had a spread and you had 12 cards and they had in a fixed order, but you can shuffle, placing one behind the deck and so on. Mm-hmm. The moment you were born, you stop shuffling and you pull the first card. All the rest of the cards just fall into the place of that tarot spread, if you will. And it's like, it's not as exact because we can't see that. First of all, it's not a house. It is an entity that we are using to understand the zodiac and its relationship to our lives. So that would be a key difference, is just in Placidus astrology, dividing the house system based on degrees will actually create really wonky, interesting things in people's charts. But with the concepts that are behind Hellenistic astrology and the whole sign house system, where every sign rules 30 degrees of a house from 0 to 29, and then moving on to the next, those all are correlated with the meanings of each house, each planet, each sign, because everything is interconnected based on like metaphysical concepts, which as an Earth sun, I just needed that. As a Capricorn, I want to see the evidence of what I'm telling people is, the energy of this season. So it made me more satisfied to see the exact houses. And I also like the concept of whole sign aspects. So it's not degree based, but so I use both, but like in terms of like understanding a house that has no planets or aspects to it, we can look at the ruler of that house and can it make an aspect to its home that's positive, like a trine or a sextile. That will give us more information. So lots of detail, but ultimately the reason I arrived at that place was learning the backgrounds of why.
Yeah, so it gave you a bit more of an understanding.
Totally. And I think more confidence explaining it to clients that are seeking my guidance. It's not that I don't believe that. I've had many readings in Placidus with modern astrologers that are very accurate, and that's because they've studied that system. And that's, there's an element of like what you seek out is like for you and makes the most sense. So for you, your medium tarot, and, there are certain things that, make more sense to me in this system just because of my wiring. I like the history, and I've always been interested in metaphysical concepts. So my teacher, Achyutabhava Das from Nightlight Astrology, he really goes into that. And it was like, I literally cried. Like I cry after my classes because I'm just like, I have wanted to know, like I have wanted to understand this so badly, and to understand it through history and ancient texts. Because there are some, and I don't think a lot of modern astrologers read those. No offense if you're listening, it's okay. There's still time. Hit me up. But there are so many like mind-blowing delineations from ancient texts that are up to interpretation. You know, everything here is all up to interpretation. So
yeah.
I think there's one other thing I would say too, that's a big difference, and that's the use of the outer planets in the birth chart as like rulers of houses.
Okay.
So there's different rulerships in the modern system that I think are satisfying for us as we discovered Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. But I don't know if we can really say that that's what the ancients would have said about them either, because they couldn't see them. Maybe they could, but we didn't find any evidence of them using them in a birth chart. And in the Thema Mundi, which is the birth chart of the cosmos, and that's essentially like a map of where we get all of the rulerships from.
Okay.
So the Thema Mundi, it's the birth chart of the cosmos, and that will determine all of our planetary rulerships in terms of signs and planets going together. But in modern astrology, we can hear Pluto as the ruler of Scorpio, or Uranus as the ruler of Aquarius, or I think Neptune for Pisces. You know, although these might make sense with the meanings that we have actually applied to the planets. So it's like, oh, okay, yeah, like, of course they make sense. But these planets weren't discovered until after the Thema Mundi. So I don't necessarily use them when I first look at someone's chart myself, because it'll mess up like the beauty of the natural delineation process from ancient astrology, where you don't need to see Pluto in a square with my Venus. You're going to see it somewhere else. Like there's another place that you will find that. Yeah, that's been an interesting thing, is unplugging that from my brain. And then what I do use those planets for are transits, because they move a lot slower and we feel them quite, intensely because they move so slowly. So when they move signs or turn retrograde or direct, that might be more noticeable.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, yeah, I would say those differences. And then one other thing for me would be just, I like how Hellenistic astrology, this is going to be a little blunt and a little controversial, but I like how Hellenistic astrology isn't like allowing us to like manifest our lives completely, because I don't really think that's realistic in the world that we live in. We have poverty, hardship, lots of things that go on in the world. And
yeah,
I've always struggled with that. Just to be honest, my view on like spirituality has just, it's been such a existential wonder of whether or not I can manifest my life, or is there a destiny involved? And this system really opened that up for me in terms of realizing it's both.
Yeah.
I like how there's more of a healing, like acceptance of like, what you have created. When someone is in a predicament and you look at the chart, well, it could be because of decisions you've made in your life or things that you've planted. Or maybe it's, if you believe in past lives, or if not, family stuff like seeping in. We have patterns that, like, for me, it really points to the idea of fate involved. And that's, a scary thing for a lot of us that want to be manifestors, because we want to be able to control things. But for me, it really clicked that it can be a coexisting relationship, and we are both in constant conversation with our fate through every action. And we have free will, but there are, there's only 24 hours in the day. And, we can have a bunch of things that we want to do, but eventually the day ends. And that's part of astrology. And one of the things that made me cry was the primary and secondary motion of the sky illustrates that point perfectly, that the planets rise and set. So I think those really do it for me in terms of the key differences. And no offense to anyone who practices modern, because again, it brought me here and I'm grateful for every astrologer because it's really needs to be more widely used, I think, for a concept of understanding the self.
Yeah, definitely. And even for me, just looking back and seeing how different planets had affected my energy and how my energy was interacting with these planets and what that meant in different aspects of my life. It's just been mind-blowing.
I love looking back at my astrology. It's like that has been a huge eye-opener for me in terms of learning.
Yeah.
You can't deny your own experience. So when you see it in the chart, it's like, okay, maybe that planet does rule my relationships.
So I know you mentioned retrogrades earlier, but even if you don't know much about astrology, you generally know when a retrograde is happening. And it's always seen as a negative thing.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Isn't that interesting? I think, I feel that for me, I'm ruled by a retrograde planet. I'm ruled by retrograde Mars. So I've learned to love what that means for me. What I would say, just backing up, what retrogrades imply is the need to go back and review or rework, reprioritize. Any prefix of redoing something is going to be like an indication of a retrograde period. And then depending on the planet, which the planets were thought of as, I think the word planet was wandering star. So it was like, it represents us. And like, we don't know what we're doing. We're just wandering here. So sometimes we have to really go into a period of internal reflection. And I think that is a good word too, like reflection for retrograde periods, is just taking a pause and not moving so quickly as things shift around us. One key thing that I have recently, over the last couple years doing Hellenistic, noticed and learned is just the emphasis on retrograde cycles. I think in modern astrology is more about like the entire period. But in ancient astrology, they paid a lot more attention to planets as they went retrograde, as they stationed retrograde and slow down in the sky from our perspective. By the way, guys, not actually moving backwards. They're just rounding the corner of their orbit in our perspective from Earth. So essentially, when we move our attention to like, what a retrograde period could mean, it's like we look into what we might be pausing on, standing still on, rethinking, maybe reorienting ourselves to the new reality that's shaping around us. It's usually a time when things are shifting. So they paid way more attention to that period, as well as when planets were stationing direct. This was thought of as like an intervention from your guides. Like, if you were born with a retrograde planet, you should get a reading from me and let's see if it's going direct, because you'll see like a lot of people who are on a journey and getting readings or like doing any sort of spiritual work or therapy or anything. They're usually, if they're retrograde planets, they're usually turning direct very shortly, which is another key difference between the two systems. Is your chart is actually a moving image and a timeline, and it's not just you. That would be so tough for me if that were true with my chart. But the planets continued moving after you were born. And so any retrograde planets eventually turn direct, right? So I think it's interesting how there's a focus on retrograde periods, but less on the time right before and after, which is usually when we feel it the most. So we're coming up on one right now with Jupiter as we record this. I think when you release it will be during, but this will be rethinking of the expansion that we've just experienced around the house of Aries. So I think of it as like taking one step back and two steps forward after for a retrograde period.
So during retrograde, the world it's not ending, basically.
No, I mean, I think I mean, I feel like usually there's a chaotic energy that moves through the people, because another thing is there's a word for planets in the Indian tradition, grahas, which meant grabbed. So it's like you're grabbed by everything and you're just like, Mercury's retrograde. Like, I'm just going to text him. Or like, no, like, I need to just buy a new car. It's fine. And then no, like usually during that period, we're moving way too fast. We're not thinking, and it's not Mercury that's causing, your computer to die or whatever. It's you pressing the button 50 times, not being patient with the movements going on around you. And that is like the grabbed feeling.
Okay, so this really isn't a negative thing.
Totally.
It's reassessing, reevaluating, taking a step back to look at where you are, where you've come from, and what's next. And it's healthy to take a break and reevaluate your situation before making your next move.
I love that you said that, because it's kind of a delineation of my Mars retrograde, because it's the need to take a break. I like to go forward a lot. And then I also have a mission in my life with that, to express my desires, which, thank you for giving me this platform because it is something that I know I'm supposed to do with that planet. So if you have a retrograde planet in your chart, it's usually going to indicate some sort of theme with that planet and what that planet means for you in your chart, where you're kind of working with developing that internally within yourself. It doesn't mean that that's constant through your life, that you're always, Mercury retrograde, my phone's breaking every day. No, you're probably just a very linear thinker, and you need to think about things fully before you say them. And maybe that's good for you. Maybe that's hindering you. It depends on your chart. So there's so many things to consider when we look at a retrograde, and one that, transiting retrogrades. We have retrogrades every year with different planets, and it depends on the seasonal year, like what's going on in the sky with that retrograde. Is Uranus there, with that Mars? Yes, coming up. So I think it'll be interesting to see this summer of retrogrades. We have quite a few coming up that will kind of last through the end of the year. We've had a very go 2022, especially April. Now we're starting to kind of like, whoa. I mean, if you think about it, we wouldn't want direct energy at all times. Like you said, we have to take time to, see the plants that we've, really grown over the last couple of months. Like, what is truly sprouting up, and what can we, weed out that we don't need.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We've talked about charts a little bit, but what is a natal chart, and how can knowing about it help us along our journey? What can it teach us? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So the natal chart is essentially a description of the karmic field operating within. I don't like to define it as you, because if we look at the chart in depth and what the ancient astrologers were trying to communicate with this circle of 12 signs, 12 houses, and 7 traditional planets, what is it that each planet means? It's determined by your rising sign. So for each person, your rising sign is going to determine the placements and their topical significations for you specifically. But there's also universal significations where, we might know this one, your sun, is your purpose or like your ego. But what you might not know is it also represents the father, your relationship with authority. It can also relate to, if you're Scorpio, like Elle and I, we're both Scorpios. So we have Leo ruling the 10th. So it represents our career. But for each person, your sun is going to really represent the plot line of your life and less about you personally. I usually will hear from people like, oh, I don't relate to my sun.
Yeah.
Or if they do, I'm thinking, no, you're not. You're totally something different, but you just want to be that. And it's because it's the ego thing. Like, people are like, oh yeah, I'm a Capricorn. Like I used to totally be like that because all I wanted was to be a very, boss bitch energy. And then we have like, in the chart also houses, which for me, reading through the texts that my teacher provided in our class, all these ancient astrology texts, they really map out that the houses were like realms of life in which the planets could play out their desires and actions within. So planets, I believe, are kind of similar to like, since they are wandering stars, and that's kind of like how we feel here on Earth, it's kind of like our connection to the cosmos. So we, I don't think they represent us, but they are parts of us and tendencies. And I believe that as the chart moves and animates after you're born, those planets take on more meaning as you make choices through your life through those periods. So like as the sun moves through the chart for you and I, that's our career, each month there's kind of a new energy for work. And you'll notice like with different planets that rule certain houses in your chart, like there's a certain rhythm to it. Like every summer, there's like a relationship energy because we have Taurus in the relationship house. And during Taurus season, there's lots of stuff going on there. So usually that's when we feel that energy in our lives. So it's like there are cycles within the chart. A natal chart will also include relationships between the planets. And what's really interesting that I learned through the last several years with Hellenistic is why do trines have such a positive symbolic meaning? And why do squares have a challenging meaning? And it all has to do with planets and their ability to see one another. Is there a view of sight from planet to planet or from planet to their domicile home or the sign that they rule? And for some reason in ancient astrology, planets could not see the houses directly to the right or left, as well as directly right and left of its opposition. So those two houses were considered inconjunct. You might see that in a reading, like with Placidus, they use that word. But essentially, you want lines of sight between the planets because it's like our energy playing out in the universe. Different parts of us, is our mental health ruler of the 12th in conversation with key parts of our persona, maybe our chart ruler, or is, our relationship ruler, is it in the home? Will we meet our partner somewhere, in the neighborhood or from home? Through family? Like there's interesting delineations with houses because of their meanings. As you move out, so 1 being yourself, all the way to 12 being your mental health and blind spots, there's lots of things in between. And then looking further into the houses, you get more information. A lot of people will say, I don't have a planet in my 7th house. Like, I'll never be married. I'm like, no, actually that's considered, that can be really nice to not have anything in there. But you can always find information. There's so much information in the natal chart. I could do 50 readings for somebody just using different timing techniques, which we haven't even gotten into, which I don't know if we should. But yeah, there's lots of different ways you can look at the chart and see cycles of your life based on interactions between planets, where they're placed in the realm of your life. You know, like it's really interesting to see specifically where your chart ruler is, because, for instance, like a Leo rising, they're allowed to say their sun sign. That's fine with me because they're ruled by the sun. But, you know, if you have your chart ruler in a certain house, that can really tell you a lot about you personally and your psychology, which I think that's what people are looking for when they get a natal chart reading. So usually I will focus on the sun, moon, and rising for the original natal chart reading, and then any other questions that they have. And then the moon, I don't know if I touched on this, is a lot less of like your emotions. And, you know, it does touch on that a little bit because it's the mind and body, like the mind-body connection, but also like the environment. Like, I'm forgetting, what's your moon sign?
Capricorn.
Oh, I love you. Oh my gosh. Okay, so yeah, you had to grow up fast. You have 3 kids. I already knew that. I didn't just guess that from the astrology. But she had to grow up fast. Just having a Capricorn moon, like, that shows the environment of your life was not like, I kind of like to relate it to like styles of movies. Like a Wes Anderson film would be like a Libra moon or something, like something very stylized. Like there's like a whole flow to it. But then, you know, Capricorn moon can indicate relations with mother, or your experience as a mother having to grow up fast. And, you know, there's so many delineations of that as well. So
yeah, I actually lost my mother at a young age.
Wow.
So, and, you know, that obviously made me grow up really fast. So it's interesting how that all incorporates.
I know. And, you know, seeing things in a chart as well like that, that's why it's important for me. I really love doing readings over Zoom or in person, because I can ask someone, you know, what's going on in their life so that, you know, there's a lot of things I can see in a chart. So certain things that maybe that person is not looking to know, I really like to pay attention to that, because if you look at the chart and you ask a question, it's like you're consulting the oracle with tarot cards, you know? You get a more direct answer. If I'm just fishing out something, you know, I'm a Scorpio, so I'll look for I'll look for things that, you know, I tend to see things because I'm learning the system, and I've learned what to watch out for in terms of like reading for someone under their Saturn return, like before Saturn return, how you can gear the reading so that they're like best prepared for that without like scaring the crap out of them, you know? Like it can be really hard to know, oh, all the structures are going to fall that you once knew, and you'll have to rebuild them, and it's going to be based on how well you've done. Okay, have a nice day. Yeah, no. So I read it in a different way. You know, I say like, it's both. It is the most beautiful experience I've ever had. I could cry right now. Having my Saturn return was like literally breaking through so much limitation. And then also having to deal with what that meant, but doing so with this like, I can do it energy. Just like Saturnian, like Capricorn, you get it because you're Capricorn moon. Just like, I was born to survive this. Like, I can do this. So I always pump people up if they're approaching that. I start them early at 26. No, I'm just kidding. I will usually only, I like to just ask the client what they are looking to understand, and that will open up doors for what I'm seeing and how to interpret the transits. Because like if someone's asking for career help, and I'm seeing, you know, stuff going on that's really helpful, Even if there's other things going on, other areas, they might be also contributing to the storyline of that person changing careers. So it's all about the context. And, working with patients one-on-one in the mental health practice has helped me a little bit with talking with people and getting to the root of what's going on so I can do the best reading for them.
And you have such a beautiful way of conducting this because, you can go into readings and feel like, oh my God, am I going to be terrified by this information or am I going to feel empowered?
Yeah.
And you honestly give the best of both worlds. I leave your readings feeling like I have this information, I am prepared, but I'm also motivated to make changes and exceed goals. So if you haven't had a reading with Kelsey, I would highly recommend it. She is amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I really try. And it's not like I have to try. The transits are both positive and negative all the time. Like, is what we want actually positive in the grand scheme of things all the time? In my experience, it has not been so in the past. And it's really interesting to learn astrology and realize that your desires might not be the best thing for you at that time, and to trust the timing. You'll see when it is the time, how perfect it is and how you're more well aligned for that experience.
Yeah.
I think that waiting until after Saturn returned to do my astrology business was the best decision ever, because I had no idea how to support myself in terms, in terms of like symbolically with that that choice. And I think also meeting people like you who are also, a little floofy, it's been really cool. And I also love how you're Scorpionic, so more direct and less like flowery with things, because that's something I struggle with in the spiritual community of healers. And although I fit in quite well, I also stand out because I'm a bit intense, and I don't like to tell people that it'll all be okay when I can see it might be a challenge. Like, I'm not gonna do that to somebody. But what I won't do is scare them, because it's not scary. You were literally born for that. That is what you are approaching. So yeah, and I have some really challenging natal placements. So I would say I take a lot of time with myself to understand, how to process that. So I do believe I can communicate it to people in a way that helps them rather than stresses them out. I have a friend actually who was afraid of doing astrology, and it's been so funny to see like how much she loves it now, because she's just realized she's doing exactly what she's supposed to be doing. It's very affirming.
Yeah. I've found that actually with soul map readings with my clients, because I'm not going to hide the challenges from them. That is not benefiting them. But instead, making them aware of these challenges and saying, hey, you've got the skills, you've got the tools to overcome this. You just need to put them all together, basically. It's much more beneficial.
Exactly. A lot of it is just accepting yourself. Like, every transit that I resist, it's because I feel like I need more time, which is so Capricorn sun for me, just to be like, oh, like I could do better if I study for one more day. And I think what astrology has helped me most with is realizing that there are cycles in which I have, input and free will, and it's called every day. And you can wake up and make choices to shift the karma of certain placements, I've seen it, like, for instance, my mom, she has a really interesting health chart, and she actually is a breast cancer survivor. So really challenging couple years through it, but survived. And the way it's manifested now is she's really a pet lover. And that's the same house in astrology, the 6th house of health, pets, coworkers, things that you have to take care of. That's the best way to describe it, is like the shit you got to do the shit you want to do.
Yeah.
But my mom has become such a service-oriented person after surviving cancer that it just shows there's so many delineations and symbolic meaning of the planets as they animate through time.
Yeah.
There's different techniques that you can use. One of my favorites I'm learning right now that's just blowing my mind is zodiacal releasing. It's a timing technique. And there's also annual profection years where each year you turn a new age and progress through the houses. There's overlapping cycles in astrology that you can use as healing tools, self-reflection tools, simply a meditation. You could read the horoscope and then go outside and forget it. That's also fun. Like, I find it to be such a beautiful art form where I can just escape the literal world. My Instagram has shifted from just so much shit I didn't want to see to like amazing, astrological delineations from different people who are practicing, or I have a lot of friends that are tarot readers like you, and just my feed is different because I'm choosing to, place my attention somewhere else. And sometimes that can be hard because it, as I was talking to you earlier, the challenges of practicing tarot or, more mystical art forms is just having to switch off those things when you're like dealing with life and just being a human.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm incorporating into my practice, is like taking a day off from my transit tracking and like seeing how it goes.
Yeah, it's good to leave some things being a surprise. Otherwise, where's the fun in that?
Totally. I know for the beginning, the time I spent reading charts, I was reading so many charts that I forgot to like really look at my own chart for like a long time. When I first started studying, like a couple months, I was like, I should look at my own placements, because I was just doing the homework, and it was so funny to look and have that moment. But it actually was a really amazing time of expansion for me, where I wasn't aware of the transits, but they were still occurring. So really cool retrospect lens.
Yeah, like we said earlier, it's good to be able to look back and see how you reacted to the energy.
Totally.
I know we mentioned Saturn returns before, but can you tell us a little bit more about what a Saturn return is and what to expect during that time period? Because I know, like, I'm in mine now.
Yeah, my pleasure. I would love to. So Saturn return refers to the planet Saturn returning to its natal position in your chart in the transits. So you can expect to have Saturn return if you have Saturn in Aquarius from 2020 to about 2023, March 2023. By whole sign aspect, it's that whole time. But I think if you're coming up on it, you have degrees similar to mine. So it's essentially just a time of maturation and realizing the boundaries that you need to set.
Yeah.
And the structures that need to fall for you to really take responsibility for the things that you want to take responsibility for. And also to like analyze your life in terms of, what is your, what has my conditioning done to this structure I'm living within? And should I rethink those limiting beliefs a little bit so that I can reach a goal that's more aligned with my true self? So I think with a Saturn return transit, a lot of people will turn inward and make choices like cutting off relationships, leaving a job, changing a style of communication or attachment. Depending on where it falls in your chart, that's going to give you an idea of the topics. And what I mean by that is the sign, but also the house. I would say the house placements are going to be more helpful in terms of like what to expect. So Saturn return for us is about family, the home, and family karma, just reckoning with you growing up fast probably and being like, okay, my kids are growing up. Yeah, for sure. For me, it was a big move, and I have my natal Venus there as well. So what's interesting there, an example, is Venus rules my relationship house, and I ended up meeting my partner on that day that it crossed. So it was me maturing into just a much more healthy relationship, that the person I was spending time with was supporting me in every way without that feeling of codependency that I had experienced with so many others. Yeah. And I felt like that was Saturn. I mean, it was me, but it was also Saturn. So yeah. And I feel that like, yeah, the Saturn return for everyone, you know, it occurs around 28, 29, and then again at 55, 56, 57. That will be a time in which you reckon with the structures you've built in your life and whether or not they're continuing to work out for you. So, you know, if you have to move or restructure your career or change your friendships, or maybe, you know, pay off debts from the past, having it in the 8th, you know, there's so many ways in which this transit can be the best thing that ever happened, especially for Capricorn placements. Like, it's just it's something that you'll probably feel was an important moment for, at least in this season, for you and I with the current transits for our career. Doing this, because it's opposite the career house. And for everyone else, look at the house that Saturn is in your chart and think about what's limiting you there, and do you need to accept that? And if it's in your control, can you change it? If it's not, can you change your perception? It's a lot about maturing and taking responsibility for the direction that you're headed.
Yeah, I love that. I'm excited for mine.
Yeah.
I feel like my dad and I are set to go through our Saturn returns together.
Oh my gosh. So lovely. That's awesome.
I feel like we'll really have each other's backs on it.
It's so great to have a Saturn return buddy.
Yeah. So I know we talked about the houses a little bit, but could you go into a bit more of a breakdown as to what each house represents?
Sure. So the first house, I would just call it the self. I'm going to try to do one words here. The second house is going to be resources. And it's going to be, see, I can't just do one word, but it's going to be things that you personally acquire, like acquired income or your stuff. It's also your dreams, the things that you want go there, because they're about to rise up into the first. And then the third house would be the familiar. So your conditioning, your siblings, your mind environment, your habits. The fourth home, family roots, ancestors. I would say also patterns, just like things that are integral to your being. The fifth house is the house of joy. It was the joy of Venus. So it's fun, pleasure, sex, love, romance, children. The sixth house, the opposite. It was actually called the house of bad fortune. Yay.
Oh no.
But it is not actually like, that's in terms of the word sacrifice and what that means for humans. It's not necessarily pleasurable for us to sacrifice ourselves. So that's why it's called bad fortune. But really what it means is it's the house of sacrifice and what we do to take care of others. So that's going to be our coworkers, our pets, our own physical body. You can stretch it out to like whatever is annoying you, to be honest. And then the 7th house is going to be relationships and partnerships, contracts, interconnected topics. The 8th house goes a little deeper, and it's how you depend on others. So it's kind of flipped from the 6th house. So this is your dependencies, other people's money. So the 8th house can also be like the karmic results, both good and bad, from relationships. So like the things you get from the past, like debts and investments, like what do they bring later? The 9th house is going to be foreign things. So traveling, higher learning, astrology, just things that have to do with shifting your mindset and philosophy and ideology. The 10th house is career, purpose, also just your vitality and your professional image, like how do people see you, your reputation. The 11th house would be your allies, your friendships, your social networks, and benefactors that help you get to your career. So it's like supporting the 10th house just by being right beneath it. So you can kind of conceptualize all the houses that way, as their meanings are interconnected to one another. And then the 12th would be blind spots and things that undermine you.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for explaining a bit more about that. So I guess you could say each house supports each other.
Yeah, and it's so cool to look at the rulers of each house and where they're placed in your chart, because that will tell you more about that house. So for people who don't have any placements in a certain house, look at the sign and find the ruler of that sign, and whatever topics you're seeing with that house probably have to do with the things you'll experience during a transit there. So it's kind of like a map. It's like analyzing. Have you ever seen one of those books that like it's like a trippy image, and then you hold it close to your eyes, and then you like move it away from your eyes, and it's like an optical illusion?
Yeah.
It's I hope everyone understands what that means. But that's how I see astrology. It's like I could look at the same chart and I'll just see different things pop up based on the transits.
Yeah, that's really cool. I really like that. And I mean, I used to freak out because I had fuck all in my 2nd house.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, 2nd house, resources, money. What does this mean? But finding out that, there were other aspects you could look at, and it may have a different meaning than what you initially think.
Yeah, totally.
This made more sense to me, and I just needed to be more educated about it.
Yeah, and it's probably something that you can like interpret a different way, because sometimes the 2nd house has to do with dreams or like things that you want. So it could represent, like, if it's a challenge, like the changing of a dream, or like you are shifting what you actually want in life at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe even last eclipse cycle because of the South Node in Sagittarius.
Yeah, gosh. I mean, so much has changed just this past year for both of us.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I know. South Node in the 1st house much. We're like just checking in on each other every now and then.
Yep. Gosh, it has been such a journey. And I know you've learned so much through this process, but what do you feel is your most inspiring lesson you've learned through this experience with astrology?
I think it's definitely the acceptance of who I am, and also just the impermanence of life, that like things change and move, and it's helped me to take life less seriously, to take life less literally, and to look at it more symbolically in terms of, my journey. Like, we're all just here wandering. Like, we have to figure out how to survive in terms of like all the human emotions we experience, the human afflictions. I think astrology has helped me learn that life is like constantly moving and nothing will stay the same forever. And that can be a beautiful thing and a scary thing, but it's always a beautiful thing in terms of your evolution, because you're always growing.
Yeah.
Like, even the most challenging experiences I've had, I just can't imagine who I would be without them. Just integral to my life. And I don't know if I would be doing astrology if I didn't go through those things. So even though it's difficult to do work on yourself, like go to therapy and seek out an astrology reading or, whatever it is that you're doing to work on yourself, like even doing yoga and releasing your hips, there's so much energy stored there. Like doing the work is hard because I've learned that I'm very detailed and that I remember everything that I learned. So what I've learned is that this is kind of like a life path that I've chosen and that I accept that. Like it felt like an initiation moment when I saw that I was an astrologer in my own chart, because I was, really curious as to what my career was going to mean in my chart, getting readings from people. And then I realized, oh, like that's what I would be really good at. And it felt like acceptance for everything else that was shitty in the chart. So it's been a very beautiful mirror. Like I just have felt so much company from like God, like whatever God is for me in a given day. I just feel like I'm always redefining and connecting with my higher power. And really it's been through astrology that I felt the strongest connection with my guides. And it's brought me to connect with people that are like-minded, like you. And I've really felt like I've found my path. So that was a big lesson, is just acceptance and less law of attraction. Like, I'm so sorry if everyone listening is really into that. It's not that I don't believe it. I practice affirmations all the time. Every thought we think is an affirmation. So it's not, I do believe that we attract, there's evidence to show that, we can attract experiences and there's neuroplasticity and we can change our brain. But nature, I don't know. I mean, nature, the universe, we can't even see. Have you seen those images of the nebula and the black hole that they came out with this week? I'll send them to you. But there's new images, and I can't let go of my wonder about the universe. I have to figure it out while I'm here. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like those feelings can be tough to navigate because you can feel like this is meant to be, this is written in the stars. But you can also feel like I create my own destiny.
Totally.
So I definitely feel like there's two sides to that coin.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like there are ways in which you can work with your patterns, like usually the things that we do repeatedly that we can't change. And, I put air quotes out for people who couldn't see me. And it's like basically your understanding of like how something is applying to you is basically, it's through your relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
So if you do want to break a pattern and change and, manifest something different, if that's a pattern for you, it's hard work. And I think it's more than just the law of attraction. I think the simplicity of that kind of gets me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we should just deny and, create our own lives that are beautiful. Like, we should also go to therapy and think about what created that root and how can we shift it to grow something that's more abundant for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's one thing to have that awareness that something needs to change in your life and, hoping and willing that it will happen. But it's another to hold that mirror to yourself and see what it is you need to change and what you need to work on to create that desired reality or better circumstances in your life, and doing the work to get there.
Exactly. Totally. It's just such a great self-reflection tool.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap things up, Kelsey, I know we've talked a lot about what's written in the stars and how knowing our astrology can help us prepare. So I was kind of hoping that you might be able to give us a little bit of a reading collectively as to what we can expect for the end of 2022.
I would love to, my friend. If only everyone would ask me every day for this information, because I love sharing it.
Yay, amazing.
Well, let's see. Okay, so I think I'll start with, how's everyone doing? The end of July. The end of July was a little cray, meaning we had a little bit of a shakeup with the planet Uranus conjunct Mars and the North Node. And this was in the place of Taurus. So we were experiencing themes from the eclipse April 30th of this year, resurfacing and like activating. Like shifts are happening wherever that house is in your chart. That is the area of life this is happening for you. Movement forward. But with Uranus and Mars, there could be kind of like a conflict of some kind. But it's not negative. You have to trust me on this one. This is something that will propel you into like what you'll experience in the later months. We'll have another eclipse, and this is preparing you for that new beginning. And it's kind of an opportunity to look. I know y'all are experiencing a lot of, I want to do this and I want to do that. This is kind of the time where we're doing it. So it's scary to make shifts, because it's like having to face everything that we've been thinking about. And we're also coming into a season of a few retrograde periods. So we are also feeling this like pull back as we're planning. Collectively, for this eclipse season coming up, I know a major theme, and you don't have to be an astrologer to know this, will be like financial matters in terms of like collective themes. This is because the eclipses are in Taurus and Scorpio, which have to do with like resources and sharing. And I think it's a really big indicator in the market. And, you know, I told my dad, and he did acknowledge that. And I love him for that, because he's like, you were right. So basically we'll experience some shifts in the market. I think this volatility is coming after we've just had the United States had its Pluto return. So there's a lot of like different countries right now that are experiencing like just events we've never been able to interpret because we haven't been here long enough. So just lots of stuff going on. And I would say globally, it will always impact everybody. So it's like this nation, you know, USA is experiencing some problems, and it's, you know, filtered right after we had, you know, lots of stuff going on in the world collectively. And I think the thing that I'm a little bit not so stoked about is just the continuation of division between different sides of people. But it's like, it sucks because, you know, I've always, like, since I was a little girl, like, I wanted everything to be good, you know, like, I just wanted people to be good at heart. And I still, you know, try to hold on to elements of that. But what I've realized is acceptance is the way. And we have to really learn to stay strong in our beliefs this year. Because of that division and because of some adversity. There's a lot of ego this year because Jupiter's in Aries. And I think that's blowing up the individual passions that we all have, like that don't have to do with the collective. You know, why is that? Probably because we just had to stay inside for a long time and we were very scared. So now we are moving into a time of, I'm going to do this once and for all. I'm finally going to step out of my shell and do this. I'm so stoked for my Aries people because it's just been nice for them. One thing I think I should mention is September to November, we're reactivating the Saturn-Uranus energy. They're in a square. They were exact in a square a couple times in 2021. But this year, they won't go exact, but they'll come very close. So it's like revisiting themes between the house of Taurus and the house of Aquarius in your chart, and how you've been wanting to, for you and I, this is happening in the home and relationships. So feeling a new type of relating to others, and then how that is helping you grow And that Saturn in the 4th house is all about breaking free from conditioning from the past and really just stepping into a new level of love as well. This doesn't have to always be with partners. It's also just like in general. So for everyone, it'll be a reactivation of some of the more challenging energy of 2021. So I think that there will be like a little bit of like a spooky vibe this Halloween because we're also having a eclipse. And there will be, the solar eclipse is the 25th. And then on the 8th, there's a lunar eclipse in Taurus. So
I'll just jump in here quickly, sorry, but those of you who are in the southern hemisphere, those dates may look a little bit different to you. Just be aware.
Oh, yeah. So like in terms of the times, you mean?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, exactly. For sure. Yeah, and that's a good point. I'd love to say that is like just in suit with the whole sign houses, a lot of transits aren't going to happen like that day at the time. You know, it'll be like unfolding over time. So the solar eclipse that we experienced April 30th is now coming to fruition as we move into the later half of July. And we kind of wrestle with whatever shifts we're making. And then there will be a new chapter opening in the house of Scorpio. That's going to be that second eclipse. So it's so interesting too, because there's a little bit of like, this year is all about, I think, patience and a measured approach to the things that you want to do, because there's a lot of like ambition forward with Jupiter in Aries, North Node in Taurus. Like we're just like trying to attain and be individual, and that competitive nature of Aries comes out, that ego. So we don't want to go too far, because actually Jupiter by this time is retrograde. So we're rethinking some of that. All the while there's like this energy of Gemini. Mars will retrograde through Gemini for quite a bit of time at the end of the year. That will be, I think, really interesting for like the technology developments of the world. It's cool to look back at like the early 90s. We had stuff going on with Mars retrograde in Gemini. And it's also interesting because I think Jupiter was in Aries when Instagram was created. And like right now we're experiencing like reels and like like be a performer and run your business. So it's like very interesting, right? Let's see. But yeah, so Mars will enter Gemini in August. So we'll start to feel like whatever Mars retrograde topics will be, we'll start to get them early. Then around Halloween, Mars will station retrograde. And right then, Mercury will move into Scorpio. And so I know it sounds like I'm speaking a different language, because I am, but essentially both planets are in the sign of each other's home. So Mercury is in Mars's home of Scorpio, and Mars is in Mercury's home of Gemini. And that's called mutual reception. So I feel like that's going to be really nice, because it's like we're starting this out with like both planets on the same page. And you can look to those houses, Gemini and Scorpio, to see what those will mean for you. But it's going to be like new things developing. This Mercury rules the marketplace, and Mars, like to me, this is going to be like shifts in terms of like the money marketplace and just commerce in general, how we deal with technology and developments in that area. I think one thing I want to say to everyone is just every so often, I think you should change your passwords this year because there's a lot of cyber stuff going on. When Mercury goes into Scorpio, I don't love that idea, because it's like Mercury represents communication in the marketplace and like the intricacies of human life, moving into a very Scorpio, is very intense and secretive and hidden. In general, that's a fine placement if you have it. Not saying that's bad. But in this current astrological environment, it just scares me a little bit with like what we're going through, like with different countries. And I want to make sure yeah, just like doing my due diligence, just change your passwords.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea to do
And
regularly anyway.
Of course, right? We all should be doing it more. But in terms of collectively, whatever the house ruled by Gemini is in your chart, that's the area you're going to be doing some restructuring of your ambitions, what you're really like heading towards in terms of your desires. Mars and Venus are both about our desires, but Mars goes and gets it externally, and Venus attracts it from within. When Mars is in retrograde, we might be like scheming a plan of like how we're going to get this new goal that we have. It's also considered a malefic planet, but of course, as a Scorpio, I can't just stop there. I have to say it's not bringer of bad fortune in any way. It's more so coming into some challenges so you can get what you want. Like, when has it been easy to get what you want?
Yeah.
But that mutual reception at the very beginning, I'm excited about that because that's something that always paints the cycle differently. And remember, I was saying earlier, the very beginning of a cycle in retrograde is more important than like the entire period.
Yeah.
So look to like Halloween time and like mid-January for like implications to kind of show up for you. Definitely a time to just really notice what you are realizing is important to you and your values and your sense of security this year. Because Taurus is the North Node. We're moving into a time where we're trying to find security from within, develop our resources, secure the bag, really find stable, whether it's a foundation we've built or we find it with a partner or in a job. There's something to be said about feeling a little bit of like support through the weird Scorpio energy.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Also, I've definitely noticed the ambition and drive coming up in clients' tarot readings over the last couple of weeks. So definitely, it's all drive, ambition, goals.
Oh, yeah. Totally. I know, especially for us, which I'm so stoked about because we deserve it. And South Node, honestly, any Scorpio rising out there, if you're listening, I'm here for you. It's a really big shift when the South Node moves through any house because you're letting go there. So Scorpio people are letting go of a version of themselves to really move into a conscious connection with any partners in your life, specifically with just love. Like, let love in. It's okay to not be dark all the time.
Yeah.
I loved when I got a tarot spread from Elle, and she has two options. One is witchy vibes and one is like love.
Oh, the pastel pixie one.
It's like neon colors. Okay, yeah. It has a cool name. Well, I think I picked witchy vibes, but I was like, should I just like be the Leo 10th house that I know the public wants to see? Because like I'm supposed to, you and I are really, geared that way in terms of like success in the public eye. We do much better when we're not like scorpionic and pointing out, different things that are negative.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved those.
Aw, thank you. Yeah, there's pros and cons to Scorpios because people can often love how real you are with them and how grounded and down to earth you are, but also sometimes they don't want you to be real with them.
Oh, totally.
And they want just, a little bit of comfort. So it's learning to find that balance.
Oh, yeah. But wouldn't have it any other way, honestly.
Exactly. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me today, Kelsey. I really appreciate it. Where can everyone find you if they want to work with you?
Yes, so you can go ahead and hop onto my website. It's astrologyrx.com. And my Instagram handle is Metanova Girl. So it's like Supernova Girl, if you've ever seen Xenon, but meta. For a reading, you can just schedule on my website homepage, and there's several options about types, but go ahead and email me if you have any questions about what kind of reading is the best for you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.
Well, this is your Earth side spirit guide signing off for the week. If you'd like to know more about how you can work with me, you can follow me on Instagram at l.embers or visit my website lembers.com.